Knock on wood. Knock Knock, episode 4 of series 10 for Doctor Who. And, well, first, before I get into it, I've been failing to do this lately. Reminder, I don't do spoiler free anymore. I will be talking about spoilers as I get into this. And this one was the weakest of the series so far. It's not awful, but I'm hoping that once the whole series is done, that this will serve as the low point. Because as far as low points go, you know, the show's been worse, but it's not great. And it's a shame because I tend to like the haunted house scenario type episodes. I mean, I liked Hyde. A lot of people didn't seem to love it that much, but I liked that one. And I like, you know, these sorts of scenarios. I think in a lot of ways, Silence in the Library felt like a haunted house kind of situation. And I like that sort of setup. And I like the Doctor in that kind of setup. So it's frustrating for me when a setup that normally I would go for just isn't quite clicking. The reasons are kind of hard to nail down. The supporting cast in this one is kind of generic. I mean, maybe it's because of how young and generically attractive they all are, but it does feel like they corralled the fodder from a slasher movie and just had them appear in this instead. I mean, that said, none of the acting from the supporting cast is bad. They play off each other well enough, but it's just, there's nothing impressive. And maybe that's one of the downsides about doing a straight kind of haunted house feel kind of story, which is that it's especially set in the modern time. There's not a lot you can bring to the supporting characters. Like when I think of the supporting casts that I really love, they tend to be from, you know, more outlandish situations, like Silence of the Library, which I mentioned, like The Impossible Planet, or Mummy on the Orient Express. I really love those supporting casts. This, not so much. And unfortunately, we're not getting as much of the Doctor and Bill together in this one. And that kind of has been the strong suit of the series up to this point. I love their dynamic. I love the two of them together. And they are not getting to play off of each other as much this one. So we've kind of removed one of the strengths of the show up to this point for this series without replacing it with anything. And the whole reveal, I mean, the bugs kind of skeeved me, but that's only because bugs skeeved me a little. I wasn't particularly scared by them. I don't think it was excessively inventive. I would have found it more interesting if they just found a way for the house just to be absorbing people rather than, oh, well, it's these bugs and then they kind of merge and it's this and it's weird and it doesn't completely make sense. And I don't always need Doctor Who to make sense, but I need to feel like I can follow the logic a little bit, even if I can't connect all the dots. And this one, I'm like, that's just kind of odd. I'm really shocked that we didn't address the sonic screwdriver doesn't work on wood thing. Either, you know, as a does it work on wood now, or at the very least as an acknowledgement, something for how much wood is in this, and it doesn't come up at all. That's weird. One thing I will say about the supporting cast, since they are all students, they all know who the Doctor, well, they don't know who the Doctor is, but they know him and they're like, oh, it's the Doctor. So I kind of like that we got to skip over the introductions and they're like, well, who are you? And that was kind of nice. I think the one thing that stood out to me as a smart subversion was with the caretaker of the house, you know, that twist of he's not the father of this woman who he's trying to save. He is, in fact, the child. And I think that's interesting for a number of reasons. I think partly because it's an inversion of a trope we see often. I think we see parents, you know, doing horrible things to save their children is fairly well-worn territory at this point. Children doing horrible things to save their parents doesn't come up as much. And especially in this case with a child who would have been very young when they started doing this awful stuff, and you kind of get the sense he's in a little bit of a state of arrested development. So while, you know, the twist is not particularly shocking, I think it was a smart way to play with that and to have a little bit of a more interesting way of tackling that, versus the standard thing that we're used to seeing in that kind of situation. So that was nice, and I appreciated that, but that's kind of the highlight. Like I said, a lot of this isn't bad. It's just not, there's not a lot to it. There's not a lot elevating it. We're getting a little bit more sense of whatever is in the vault. So it is absolutely a person. So that eliminates all the theories, for people who thought Gallifrey was in the vault. It is definitely a person. There was somebody playing the piano. It's somebody with a dark side, because they seem to be interested in hearing the Doctor's story once it was mentioned that lots of young people get killed in it. Oh, which makes me want to back up. I don't have an inherent problem with everybody lives stories. I'm a little bit of a sucker for them. I think they can be overplayed sometimes, but I don't have an inherent problem with that. I kind of take issue with this one, though, as and the bugs are reconstructing, these people. I mean, aside from the how does that even work thing, since they're putting everybody back together, it does make me realize, could they not reassemble, the people from the 70s, from the 50s? I mean, there's been lots and lots of people who have died here, and we're just saving the latest victims. Rest are just, nobody cares for the, okay, not even gonna mention it. All right, and it just felt, I don't know, it felt cheesy, it felt cheap, and I think the best Everybody Lives stories don't feel cheap and cheesy. They feel earned, and this one, it really didn't. It felt like a toss-off at the end. Oh, and by the way, they're all fine. I'm like, I mean, they were nice enough. I don't think they deserve to die, but really? Yeah. Anyway, so getting back to the vault. So it's definitely a person. It's a person with at least a morbid interest, if not a morbid fascination or morbid sense of humor. And that's kind of the little bits of solid information we have to go on. It is interesting to think with the titles, because last time I thought Thin Ice was going to be the Ice Warriors episode. Turned out not to be. Knock Knock, I would assume, would have had more to do with the vault. It didn't. I feel like they're trolling us a little bit with the titles of these episodes, which honestly I'm kind of down for. I kind of like that level of sort of subverting the expectations. But yeah, I don't have any new, particularly, deep theory on what's in the vault, but, as we're getting more information, it's sort of eliminating possibilities, and I'm finding that interesting as that goes on. I'm sure some people will toss out more theories down in the comments. People have done so already. I haven't responded to a lot of them because, I don't know, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of theory of what's in the vault too deeply, largely because I want to be surprised by it. It's one of the reasons that I avoid, message boards or whatnot that really get into fan theory, because inevitably you'll come across one that is more or less correct, and it's like you spoiled yourself, and I don't want to do that. I want to give this show the chance to surprise me. I mean, of course, if it turns out to be stupid and obvious, I'll call it out on that. But failing that, I would prefer to be surprised by it. So we'll see what goes on there. What were your thoughts on this latest episode of Doctor Who? Whatever they were, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. Also check out the Punch Like a Girl podcast, also available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.